He saved an Apache woman from drowning, but by sacred law, her tribe declared she now belongs to him. Watch this powerful story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's get started. The Arizona desert stretched wide under the blazing sun, the kind of heat that pressed down on the earth like a heavy hand. The San Pedro River, swollen from recent rains, rushed fiercely through its channel, carrying with it branches, foam, and a restless power. Tourists stood along the banks, pointing their cameras toward the cliffs glowing red against the horizon. Among them was Daniel Carter, a young firefighter from Phoenix. He had driven out for the weekend to escape the noise of city life, never imagining that this day in the desert would alter the course of his future. The afternoon air was filled with laughter and idle chatter, but suddenly a sharp cry cut through the noise. Daniel's head snapped up, his trained instincts kicking in before his mind could fully register the danger. In the middle of the river, caught in the raging current, a young Apache woman thrashed desperately. Her long black hair spread across the surface like ink in water. She tried to keep her head above the waves, but each surge dragged her deeper. Her arms flailed helplessly as panic set in, her voice breaking with terror. Daniel's body moved before thought could stop him. He sprinted toward the water, ignoring the startled shouts behind him. The heat of the desert vanished as icy river water closed around his body, seizing his muscles with shock. He fought against the current, every kick of his legs battling the pull of nature's fury. He had faced flames and collapsing buildings as a firefighter. But this wild, merciless water tested his strength in a different way. His eyes stayed locked on the drowning woman, determination pushing him through each brutal wave. He reached her just as her last ounce of strength gave out. Her body sagged into his grip, her lips parting as the water threatened to claim her. Daniel wrapped his arm firmly across her chest, holding her tight as he kicked with all the power left in him. The river pulled, twisted, and dragged them sideways, but he angled toward the bank, every muscle screaming with the effort. With a final surge of strength, Daniel pushed them forward until his knees scraped against solid ground, and the two of them collapsed on the river's edge. The crowd of onlookers erupted into cheers, but Daniel hardly heard them. His focus remained on the young woman, gasping for breath, her chest rising and falling erratically. He gently tilted her onto her side, letting the water drain from her lungs until her cough steadied. The relief that swept over him was overwhelming. Around them, a family rushed forward, their faces pale with fear but glowing with gratitude. They spoke quickly, some in English, others in their own Apache tongue. The woman's mother fell to her knees, weeping as she clutched her daughters. And among the group stepped forward an elder, his presence commanding silence. His long braids framed a weathered face marked by wisdom and years beneath the desert sun. He studied Daniel with eyes that seemed to look straight into his spirit. Placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder, the elder spoke in a voice deep and steady. "You have saved her life among our people by sacred law. This means she now belongs to you." The words hung heavy in the air, striking Daniel with a weight he had not anticipated. For a moment, Daniel froze, uncertain if he had heard correctly. He looked from the elder to the woman lying at his side, her breathing calmer now, her dark eyes fixed on him. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The tourists looked confused, but the Apache family stood solemn, their expressions grave, as though something ancient and undeniable had been spoken into existence. Daniel swallowed hard, feeling a chill rise along his spine despite the desert heat. He had jumped into the water only to save a life, yet somehow that single act had tied him to this woman in a way he couldn't fully grasp. The elder continued, his voice unwavering. "Her life is tied to yours. It is a bond of honor that cannot be broken." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the crackle of wind moving through desert brush and the fading rush of the river behind them. Daniel glanced again at the young woman, seeing more than fear in her eyes now. Gratitude shimmered there, But so did uncertainty, as though she too was realizing the magnitude of what had been declared. Daniel exhaled slowly, his heart pounding. What had begun as an act of instinct had drawn him into a destiny shaped not by choice, but by something older, deeper, and sacred. That evening, the desert sky painted itself in shades of violet and gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. Daniel followed quietly as Ayoka's family led him to their reservation. The village was alive with the smell of wood smoke and the sound of drums echoing through the still air. Fires burned in circles where people gathered, their faces glowing with the warmth of both flame and tradition. Daniel felt the weight of curious eyes on him as he was welcomed, not as a stranger, but as someone who had already been tied to their lives by an ancient decree. Ayoka sat beside him on a woven blanket, her posture reserved yet graceful. She stole glances at him now and then, her dark eyes flickering with something unspoken. Though she said little, Daniel felt the depth of her presence beside him, as though their silence together carried more meaning than words could. The tribe elders began to speak, their voices weaving a story older than memory. They explained that when a man risked his life for a woman, he became bound to her spirit, not as master and possession, but as two souls whose destinies had collided for a reason only the Creator knew. Daniel shifted uncomfortably as the explanation unfolded. He cleared his throat before speaking, his voice respectful but hesitant. "I only did what anyone would have done. I don't want to take her away from her people." His words carried honesty, but also a quiet fear that he was stepping into something far greater than himself. The crowd listened intently, their expressions calm, their silence not judgmental, but patient, as though they had heard similar protests before and already knew how this story would unfold. The chief, a tall man whose age had not diminished his strength, raised his hand. The gesture silenced the murmurs. His deep voice resonated through the gathering as he said, "You misunderstand. This bond does not mean possession. It means responsibility. You are now part of her path, and she is part of yours." His gaze lingered on Daniel, steady and firm, until Daniel felt the weight of those words settle into his chest. This was not a burden being placed on him, but a sacred trust, and it was up to him whether he honored it. The words echoed in Daniel's mind long after they were spoken. His gaze drifted to Ayoka, who finally met his eyes without looking away. A faint smile touched her lips, small but genuine, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. Gratitude and relief reflected in her expression, but there was something else too. A quiet acceptance, as though she had always known her life would one day take a turn marked by destiny. Daniel's heartbeat quickened, not from fear this time, but from a dawning realization that perhaps this connection was not something to resist, but to embrace. As the evening deepened, songs rose from the circle. Drums pounded steadily, voices blending in harmony, carrying prayers of honor and gratitude into the starlit sky. The fire crackled, throwing sparks upward like tiny fragments of light. Daniel sat among them, feeling both an outsider and strangely at home. Each note of the music seemed to wrap around him, pulling him into something larger than his own life. He glanced again at Ayoka, who now sang softly with her people, her voice delicate but strong, carrying the melody as naturally as the river carried water downstream. Daniel leaned back, staring at the vast stretch of stars above. Never before had the night sky felt so alive, so full of meaning. His mind replayed the day's events, the moment he dove into the river, the desperate fight against the current, and the look in Ayoka's eyes when he pulled her from the water. That moment had changed everything, binding their stories together in ways he could not have predicted. He realized then that this wasn't about chance at all. It was about courage, leading him to a path he hadn't known was waiting for him. By the time the fire burned low and the songs gave way to quiet conversations, Daniel knew his life had already shifted. He was no longer just a visitor from Phoenix. He was connected to something sacred, to a woman whose spirit had touched his through an act of bravery. What began as instinct had become destiny. As Ayoka walked beside him under the desert stars, their steps falling into rhythm, Daniel felt the truth settle within him. This was not an ending, but a beginning. A story born not of chance, but of fate, sealed forever by sacred law.